Life in Mexico before the Spanish conquest, that is, before 1519, was complex, organized, and very advanced, especially in Mesoamerica. It was not a single culture. There were many towns with different languages, customs, and forms of government. Here I explain it to you in clear and direct parts. In central Mexico, the Mexicas, Aztecs, dominated, with their capital being Tenochtitlan, built on a lake. In the southeast, the Maya civilization flourished, with cities like Tikal. In Oaxaca was Monte Alban. The cities had temples and pyramids, huge markets, palaces, water, and drainage systems. Tenochtitlan, for example, had canals, causeways, and chinampas, artificial islands for farming. It was one of the largest cities in the world at that time. The basis of the economy was agriculture. They cultivated corn, beans, squash, chili, and cacao. Trade was very important. There were large markets where products were exchanged. Some merchants traveled long distances. They did not use coins like today. Cacao and other products served as a means of exchange. In the Mexica Empire, the Tlatoani, or emperor, ruled. The most well-known ruler during the Spanish arrival was Moctezuma II. Society was organized into nobles, priests, warriors, merchants, peasants, and slaves, mainly war prisoners. It was not a primitive society. It was highly structured. Was it all peace? No. There were frequent wars between towns. The Mexica Empire dominated other towns and demanded tribute. That was key when the Spaniards arrived, because many enemy towns of the Mexicas allied with Hernán Cortés. But Mexico was not just the Mexicas. Centuries earlier, in the southeast, one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world flourished. The Maya. They mastered mathematics. They independently discovered zero. They recorded eclipses with astonishing precision. They built cities like Chichén Itzá and Palenque with architecture aligned to the movement of the stars. Their calendar was not superstition. It was observational science accumulated over centuries. The men and women of this ancient people had physical traits that spoke of generations adapted to the tropical jungle and life under the intense sun of the tropics. Their skin, with copper and dark brown tones, reflected the heritage of their ancestors and the strength of a people who walked for centuries among mountains, rivers, and dense forests. Their faces were broad and firm, with prominent cheekbones and deep gazes. Dark eyes that seemed to hold the mystery of the stars they studied so much. Their hair, almost always black and thick, fell straight or slightly wavy over their shoulders, a symbol of identity and pride. Many Mayans practiced physical traditions that surprise the world today. From childhood, some shaped the skulls of newborns with soft boards, creating an elongated forehead that was considered an ideal of beauty and nobility. For them, that shape reminded them of corn, the sacred plant that sustained their existence. Their bodies were strong and resilient, formed by daily work in agriculture, the construction of monumental cities, and life in a demanding territory. Men tended to have an athletic build, robust shoulders, and firm legs, shaped by long walks through jungles and stone paths. Mayan women, for their part, stood out for their elegant and serene bearing. Their black and thick hair was carefully arranged in braids or updos, while their presence reflected the balance between work, tradition, and spirituality. But beyond their physical traits, what truly distinguished the Mayans was the dignity with which they carried their identity. In their faces was drawn the history of a civilization that observed the movements of the planets. They raised pyramids that still defy time and wrote their history in codices and stone stelae. They were men and women with firm gazes, skin marked by the sun, and a spirit deeply connected to the earth and the cosmos. A civilization that not only inhabited the jungle, but learned to listen to it, understand it, and turn it into the stage for one of the most extraordinary cultures in history. For the peoples of Mesoamerica, the world had not been born just once. It had been born and destroyed several times. Each era of the universe was called a sun, and according to their traditions, 4 previous worlds had disappeared before the current one. The 5th sun was the world in which they lived. At the heart of that worldview was one of the most important gods of the Mexico world. He was the god of the sun and war. For the Mexicas, the sun did not travel through the sky by itself. It needed strength. It needed energy. And that energy, according to their belief, came from sacrifice. That is why the temples rose towards the sky, not only as monuments, but as bridges between the human world and the divine world. At the top of those temples, rituals were performed to maintain the order of the universe. Because for them, if the gods were not fed, the sun could stop rising. But not all gods were warriors. There was also a figure deeply revered throughout Mesoamerica. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, one of the most complex deities of the ancient world. He was the god of knowledge, wind, learning, and the creation of humanity. In some traditions, it was said that he was the one who gave corn to men, the food that sustained all Mesoamerican civilization. But the spiritual universe of these peoples was immense. There was also the god of rain, Tlaloc, lord of storms, guardian of lightning, master of the mountains where, according to their beliefs, the waters of the world were stored. For a people whose life depended on corn, rain was sacred. And Tlaloc was feared and respected, because without him, the land could die of drought. But Mesoamerican religion was not just fear. It was also cosmic order. The priests studied the cycles of the sky. They observed Venus. They recorded eclipses. They followed complex ritual calendars that determined festivities, wars, and coronations. For them, the universe was a living system. The sky, the earth, and the underworld were connected. The underworld was known as Mictlan, a deep realm where souls traveled after death. And its lord was Tenochtitlan, the lord of the dead, a figure represented as a crowned skeleton, not as a symbol of evil, but as a reminder of the eternal cycle between life and death. For these civilizations, death was not the end, a transit to another plane of the universe. Thus was the religion of ancient Mexico, a world where the gods walked among men, where the sky dictated the fate of empires, a world where every temple, every ritual, every sacrifice tried to maintain a balance of the cosmos. And when the conquerors arrived, they did not find faithless peoples. They found an entire civilization with ancient gods who had ruled these lands for centuries. The peoples of Mexico had already built one of the most ingenious diets of the ancient world. They did not depend on wheat, did not know rice, had no cows or horses, but they had something much more powerful: corn. For Mesoamerican peoples, corn was not just food, it was life. According to ancient Mayan accounts, the gods created humans precisely from corn. Each day began with it, ground on stones called metates, turned into dough and cooked as tortillas, tamales, or hot atolls. It was the food that sustained entire cities, but corn was never alone. Alongside it were always two other essential crops: beans and squash. Corn and squash together formed a perfect agricultural system, known today as milpa, a natural balance, where each plant helped the other grow. Corn provided structure, beans contributed protein, squash protected the soil. It was agriculture, but also ecological science. And on the daily table, chili pepper also appeared. Chili was in almost everything: sauces, broths, stews. It not only added flavor, but also helped preserve food and provided essential nutrients. But the diet of ancient Mexico was not only plant-based, it also included animal proteins. Fish, frogs, and axolotls were caught in lakes and rivers. On the shores of Lake Texcoco, eggs of aquatic insects called aguatl were collected. And in the fields, domestic turkeys were raised. Insects, chapulines, larvae. But perhaps one of the most valuable foods of the Mesoamerican world was something small and dark: cacao. With it, a bitter and frothy drink was prepared, often reserved for nobles, warriors, and rituals. It was not the sweet chocolate we know today. It was strong, intense, and so valuable that cacao beans were even used as currency. Thus was the diet of ancient Mexico, a cuisine based on the land, the lake, and knowledge accumulated over centuries. Without European farm animals, without wheat, without dairy, yet capable of feeding millions of people. When the conquerors arrived, they found markets filled with foods they had never seen. New flavors, unknown ingredients, and a gastronomy that had been perfected over thousands of years. A cuisine born from corn, the sun, and the land of Mesoamerica. In the heart of ancient Mexico, gigantic markets already existed. They were not simple exchange places. They were the economic center of a civilization. In the great city of Tenochtitlan, alongside its sister city Tlatelolco, was one of the most impressive markets of the ancient world. Every day, thousands of people arrived from all corners of the empire. Farmers, artisans, merchants, travelers. Some European chroniclers were so surprised that they compared that market to the great squares of Europe. It is estimated that more than 40,000 people could gather in a single market day. But the most surprising thing was not just its size, but its organization. Nothing was left to chance. Each type of product had its own place. There were sections for food, others for textiles, others for ceramics, others for tools, and others for luxury items. On one side, corn was sold; on another, cacao; on another, Quetzal feathers, jade, obsidian, and gold worked by master artisans. Fresh food arrived every morning. Fishermen brought fish from the lake. Farmers arrived with fruits, vegetables, and freshly harvested corn. And specialized merchants sold products brought from distant regions of the empire. Many of those merchants were known as patekas. They were not simple vendors. They were long-distance traders. They traveled hundreds of kilometers transporting valuable goods between different cities. And sometimes they even acted as spies for the Mexica Empire. Money did not work like in the modern world either. There were no metal coins. But yes, there were forms of value accepted by all. Cacao beans served as currency. Also small pieces of cotton or sheets of copper. And, of course, barter. A direct exchange between products. But the order of the market was so strict that there were even judges. Men responsible for ensuring that no one cheated buyers. That the weights were correct. That the products were authentic. The market was not just commerce. It was also a social gathering. It was the place where news traveled, where cultures mixed, where rumors of the empire ran among the crowd. When the Spaniards first saw that market, they were astonished. Hernán Cortés wrote that he had never seen anything like it in all of Europe. Thousands of people trading. Perfect order. Products from distant lands. It was the living economy of the empire. Thus functioned the markets of ancient Mexico. Not as simple squares, but as the beating heart of a civilization. A place where every day the wealth, culture, and life of the empire met face to face. Long before the Aztecs. Long before the great Mayan cities. In the humid jungles of the Gulf of Mexico, one of the oldest and most mysterious civilizations of all Mesoamerica emerged. The Olmecs. They flourished approximately between 1500 BC. Many historians consider them the mother civilization of Mesoamerica, because many ideas, symbols, and beliefs that would appear centuries later among the Maya and Mexico seem to have first been born among the Olmecs. Their main cities were hidden among rivers, jungles, and swamps. Ceremonial centers like San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes became places of power, ritual, and government. But what has most surprised the world are their stone monuments. Gigantic sculptures carved from volcanic rock. The famous colossal Olmec heads. These giant heads can measure up to 3 meters tall and weigh more than 20 tons. Each one has distinct features. Wide noses, thick lips, serious expressions, as if they were portraits of real people. Many archaeologists believe they represent Olmec rulers. Powerful leaders who dominated these lands over 3,000 years ago. But there is something even more impressive. The stone with which they were carved is not found where they were discovered. The basalt used to sculpt them came from mountains located dozens of kilometers away. In an era when there were no wheels or pack animals. Still, the Olmecs transported giant blocks of rock through rivers, jungles, and swamps. A monumental effort that still amazes archaeologists today. Afterward, master sculptors began the work. With stone tools, they struck, polished, and sculpted every detail of the face, until turning simple rocks into eternal symbols of power. Today, at least, 17 colossal heads, each unique, each holding the silence of a vanished civilization. The Olmecs also left other mysteries, sculptures of jaguar men, monumental altars, finely carved jade figures. All this indicates that their society had a deep religious and political structure. But over the centuries, their great centers were abandoned. The jungle began to cover their cities, and for thousands of years, the Olmec civilization remained hidden. Until the 20th century, when archaeologists rediscovered their monuments and the world understood something extraordinary. Long before the known empires, there existed in these lands a culture capable of moving mountains, sculpting giants of stone. The Olmecs, the first great sculptors of Mesoamerica and the creators of some of the most enigmatic faces in ancient history. Faces that, even today, seem to observe the passage of time silently from deep within the Mexican jungle. When the sun began to rise over Lake Texcoco, the great city of Tenochtitlan was already waking up. A city built on water, connected by long stone causeways, crossed by canals where thousands of canoes silently glided. With the first raid of the day, fishermen went out to the lake. Their nets sought fish, axolotls, and waterfowl that would later be sold in the markets. At the same time, in the neighborhoods of the city, women began their morning work. They ground corn on the metite, prepared hot tortillas, and the aroma of freshly cooked corn began to fill the streets. Children woke up early because in Tenochtitlan, education was not optional. Everyone had to learn. The children of the nobles attended the Kalmakak, where they studied religion, astronomy, history, and government. The children of the people went to the Telpakale, where they learned discipline, work, and training for war. In this city, each person had a role. Meanwhile, in the canals, canoes began to fill the water route. They transported vegetables, corn, flowers, fish, textiles, and ceramics. Everything was headed to one of the most vibrant places in the empire, the great market of Tlatelolco. The market was the economic heart of the city. But Tenochtitlan was not just commerce. It was spirituality. In the center of the city stood the great temple of the empire, the Templo Mayor. There, the priests performed daily rituals, lit incense, sang prayers, and observed the sky. Because for the Mexicas, the universe had to be kept in balance, and the temples were the bridge between men and gods. Meanwhile, in the neighborhoods of the city, artisans worked tirelessly. Stone carvers, cotton weavers, goldsmiths who turned gold into true works of art. The city was full of sounds. Hammers striking stone, merchants announcing their products, canoes gently bumping against the docks, and when the sun began to set, the city started to calm down. Families returned to their homes. The campfires lit up the night. Stories were told. They spoke of the gods, of wars, of the empire's destiny, because no one in Tenochtitlan imagined that a few years later, men arriving from another continent would forever change the course of their history. But in those days, before the conquest, Tenochtitlan was one of the most extraordinary cities in the world. A metropolis built on water, an empire full of life, and the heart of a civilization that had flourished for centuries. This was Mexico before the conquest. A world of great civilizations, of impressive cities, of temples, markets, and cultures that flourished for centuries, but history was about to change forever. Because very soon, from the other side of the ocean, men would arrive who would transform the fate of these lands. And in the next episode, we will see what Mexico was like after the conquest. If you are enjoying this documentary, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. See you in the next episode.